All right, guys, welcome back to another wonderful episode of BlockHash Exploring the Blockchain. Today, on episode 268, I have the CEO of Chains, Anderson McCutcheon. Did I
Close
pronounce that
enough.
right?
Yeah, McCutcheon.
McCutcheon. Okay. Um, Anderson, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on. A lot of cool things I want to talk about today with Chains. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. So to kick it off and to kind of get started, um, tell me a bit about your life, your story. How did you wind up in the blockchain world, the Web3 world? Was there anything in particular? And how did you get to where you are now with chains?
Sure. I'll try to keep the story short, but in principle, I spent most of my 20s being a developer. Uh, Originally, I'm an Israeli, and so, as do many Israelis do, I spent a few years in the army, specifically in Israeli military intelligence, when I was a developer. Not only a developer, but other things as well. But I spent most of my 20s developing real-time thermochemical control systems, developing hardware as well as various full-stack services. And so I was exposed to the blockchain roughly 11 years ago, just as I was transitioning out of my developer years and into my gaming passions. So I used to play poker for a living, and I used to be a reasonably competent StarCraft player before I got old and stupid. And so in 2011, I was hanging out with a bunch of academics and libertarians, and we got into discussion about economics, and that was basically the first time we heard about Bitcoin. And the idea of just non-government issued money was just amazing to me because we have a free market. We have free markets from almost everything at this point, and we don't really have a free market for currencies. Governments have a monopoly over currencies, and so I figured, well, it doesn't have to be like that. What if currencies were to be issued by, let's say, Bitcoin is a pseudo DAO, but let's say, what if currencies were issued by communities, DAOs, corporations, individuals, etc., and those currencies would have to compete with government-issued currencies, and so Bitcoin was just an amazing concept to me, and myself and others, we started working on getting an exchange up and running. And so in 2013, we launched one of the first cryptocurrency exchanges. We launched Unicoin. Uh, Fun and amazing times, hugely challenging from a regulatory perspective. But yeah, this was basically my first exposure to cryptocurrency and working in the Bitcoin space. You know, there were very interesting times. I think I met Vitalik Buterin in a basement in Jaffa when he was just explaining Solidity. And I just walked away amazed the second time because now I just said, okay, so now we're going to have programmable money. So if up until this point you'd have money and then you build the system that is designed to control it, at this point you could actually program money itself. And that was kind of the second time I was blown away by what's happening in cryptocurrency. And to a degree, I was active ever since. As mentioned, I have other passions, specifically gaming. So I spent many years working for Riot Games, the makers of League of Legends. And in 2020, I decided to get back into it as an entrepreneur. And myself and the core team behind Chains.com, we basically started working on this multi-product, multi-chain uh, platform that would allow people to interact with both CeFi and DeFi worlds through a single account.
Nice, nice. It sounds like a really interesting way to kind of get into this space too. And It's cool that you got a chance to meet Vitalik on a couple occasions there. He's a very interesting guy. So in regards to chains, what are some of the things you guys are trying to accomplish? What do you guys want to do specifically in this space?
So the big picture is as follows. Right now, there are just over 100 million cryptocurrency and Web3 users, which is a huge number. 100 million is a lot. But I think the industry and the products that we have to offer have to change a lot before we get to a billion users. Like transitioning from 100 million to 1 billion users is going to take a significant change with regards to what we expect from users. Right now, virtually all the participants in this ecosystem are to a degree either investors or technologists. Meaning if you hold Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, definitely any of the L2s, you have to understand the underlying technology. You have to understand the difference between the protocols. You have to understand how fees work. You have to keep up with the fluctuations in the various currencies, and you possibly update your wallet and other things related to just ensuring that your funds are secure and you can use them. I don't think we can expect that from the next generation of users. If we were to think about what the next generation of users is going to be like, we can't expect them to be technologists. And so what we're building with Change.com, the long-term goal is to build radically user-friendly products that allow people to interact with centralized finance products, but also with Web3 products from a single account, which they know is compliant and regulated and is powered by the best technological stack possible. And so they can interact with multiple products that interact with multiple chains, but without the need to deeply understand the underlying technology. Like I would say that our goal is to minimize the interaction that users must have with the chain while using the product. And we must make constantly this distinction between the product and the technology.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that would make the user-friendly aspect a bit better too, especially in the Web3 space. It can get a little complicated sometimes, and people don't want to play around and try and figure it out. They just want it to, work. Like you're able to go to Google and punch in a search query and it works. Like that's what people want at the end.
Exactly. Like nobody thinks of Facebook as a PHP company just because it is powered by PHP. You don't expect people to learn jQuery and PHP and HTML5 and cookies and everything just because that's what it takes to power Facebook. They just look at the product and do not interact with the underlying technology. I think in the long term, if we were to ever to get to the scale of 1 billion users, this is the level of kind of product friendliness that we need to provide.
Absolutely. What are some of those products? I know that you have a couple listed on the site. There's a Launchpad. There's something called Prism. There's an exchange. There's a marketplace. Do you want to touch on some of those a bit and kind of what those are going to pan out to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we obviously have this publicly available roadmap, which explains what we're working on. Some of those products are already live. Some of the products that we've launched and are launching are not even in the roadmap because they're not strategic enough in a sense. So the first product that we introduce is the Launchpad. Right now we have a Launchpad that supports 13 payment methods. It supports various stablecoins. It natively supports 4 different chains and their native currencies as well as Bitcoin. We support Visa and MasterCard. We're integrated with the Coinbase payment gateway. We have KYC and account management, investing systems, and all of that is already live and working in the Launchpad. And so we're conducting our own token issues, token generation that on our own Launchpad. So this is us kind of eating our own dog food. So we built the product, and we're using our own product to launch our own token instead of relying on external Launchpad and exchanges. The next product that we're going to introduce, the big product, is going to be Prism. Prism is an analytics and portfolio management product, which is specifically designed for people who want to track cryptocurrencies, but also equities, commodities, and other assets. So not only that, it also allows you to look at assets through the value of other assets. So for instance, you could be looking at the price of Tesla in terms of Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So you could be looking at all of the cryptocurrencies through the prism of Solana. So this is why we decided to call it Prism. So basically, if you have like this one asset that comprises over 50% of your portfolio, you're probably going to care a lot more if the rest of the assets fluctuate up or down compared to your base assets. Obviously, this is not a mandatory feature, but we know this is something that was requested by our community, and we decided to implement it like that. So as mentioned, the next product is going to be an analytics and blockchain-focused product, which is also going to be providing API access to businesses and external services that want to feed into all the data. The next thing that we're going to introduce is an exchange, which is pretty much a mandatory product for any service, which is a multi-product CeFi. Multi-product CeFi is basically the common name that you would give to Binance, Crypto.com, Coinbase, etc. Like if you were to go to Binance, you're probably going to see around 14 to 15 products tied to your account. And so obviously we're going to introduce an exchange, licensed, regulated, connected to the same account that your users have created when they're set up their Change.com accounts to use Prism or the Launchpad. And kind of our end game product is the marketplace. A perfect marketplace is basically a marketplace where everything is money, right? So sellers can accept the currency of their choosing, and buyers can use any currency as a payment method. And this is something that we can enable once we have enough liquidity and we have the exchange up and running. Basically, everything becomes money on that sort of marketplace.
Do you guys have a native token that serves as like the underlying foundation for these products?
Yes. So we've issued CHA, which is our own token. It is issued on 4 blockchains. It is issued on Ethereum, BNB chain, Tron, and Polygon. And this is the native utility token, which is pretty much the backbone of all those products in terms of economics. So basically, if you're using Change.com, you should definitely hold CHA and utilize CHA when you're transacting with Change.com. It is not entirely unsimilar to BNB and FTT. I think those tokens have really good models. And so our utility token is similar to a degree to its utility. For instance, in the coming week, we'll be introducing a rewards program, specifically targeting our affiliates. It's an entire product designed for professional marketers. And the more CHA you hold, the bigger your rewards are in terms of receiving bonuses. When you refer people to Change.com, you receive a higher revenue share, and you also become eligible for special prizes by referring users to Change.com. So for instance, if you refer over 9,000 users, you get a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT.
Got it. That makes sense. That's an interesting system. How does the tokenomics model work to help incentivize people within the system? Are there different ways to go about doing that? Because I noticed some on the website, some that even you guys have pioneered too, like the earned income credit system. Do you guys have uses like that or use cases that are similar? Or I guess best put, what are some of the aspects of your tokenomic system that are more unique compared to maybe others?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm a huge believer that nothing works on ideology. Basically, on a long enough timeline, people will not invest or hold assets based on ideology. They do things out of self-interest. So CHA provides very kind of tangible, specific benefits to people that have it. So I'll start with the most obvious example, the product that we'll be launching next week, which is the Change Rewards Classic and Change Rewards Pro programs. So the more CHA you have, and the higher your rewards are. So if you hold over a certain amount of CHA, you can get as much as 3% of the revenues generated by your referrals. And if you hold less CHA, you'll be earning less than 1%. So if you are a community manager, if you have significant social presence, if you're an influencer and you're promoting change.com, you want to hold a certain CHA balance in order to receive the maximum amount of rewards possible. Same goes if you're trading on an exchange. So if you are an active trader, a day trader, if you stake CHA or you're using CHA as a way of paying for your fees, you'll basically be provided with significant discounts. So it makes sense to use CHA and not any other currencies when you're paying your fees. And it also makes sense to accumulate CHA if you want to pay lower fees in general. You mentioned EIC. So EIC is something that was designed by an economist, Asaf Patir, who's made tremendous contributions to our token economics. He holds a PhD in macroeconomics from Northwestern University, and he helped us design the earned income credits system. So one of the things that we know about online marketplaces is that freelancers tend to abandon marketplaces during shock events. So what is a shock event? Basically, a lot of freelancers to a degree rely on having these long-term high-value customers that can sometimes account for more than 60% of their income. And so when they lose those customers, they can experience periods where they must find a job because they can no longer afford being freelancers, right? And this is the primary reasons why freelancers specifically leave marketplaces, is because they have these periods where they do not find the right jobs to remain freelancers, or they have bills to pay, and so they transition back to being employees instead of freelancers. So what we've built is the system, EIC, Earned Income Credits, which algorithmically analyzes these shock events as they happen on the marketplace, and during those events, it compensates freelancers based on their history. So if you are an active participant on the marketplace, for a year you've been earning really well, your work was well reviewed and rated, and you're going through this downswing, so to speak. So we're like, okay, we don't want to lose you as a market participant, even though you don't have clients at the moment. So there is a special pool to which CHA tokens are allocated, from which we will be willing to cover up to 60% of your standard revenue, so you can keep promoting yourself on the marketplace until you get back to a position where you have clients again, instead of you leaving our marketplace and going somewhere else. And for instance, that sort of mechanism is completely unique and actually impossible to implement unless you have a token like CHA. Right? So a marketplace like Upwork or freelancer.com cannot implement this because they can't actually build just a giant pool of money from which they pay people. It requires an external native token that is entirely used for compensating and maintaining people within the system.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of encouraging freelancers to kind of stick around, maybe help them out, give them other options to earn. Let's take a step back and look at it from a macro perspective. When you look at the overall DeFi ecosystem and the DeFi market that's starting to emerge globally, and how that kind of competes with the traditional finance or centralized finance system, how do you think freelancers begin to fit into that? I imagine there's going to be a lot of ways for them to work on a platform like Fiverr, like Upwork, something similar, but it's going to be decentralized, or it'll be in some kind of decentralized community. Do you think it's going that direction as well? And do you think maybe that's the best place for them in the future?
I'm not sure. So I think a lot of the things around decentralization are more ideological than practical. So if I'm a graphic designer or an accountant or a lawyer or a coder, if what I care about is putting food on my family's table, or affording that vacation, or eating and sleeping well, what I care about is an efficient marketplace where I can get the right kind of work, where I have the security of getting paid. And in case something happens to me, I have some level of security provided by the platform in this particular case. But let's assume that that virtually never happens. But let's say in our case it does. And so I think that if a freelancer would have to pick between a really good marketplace and a worse marketplace that is simply decentralized, I think they would simply prefer the better product, because end of the day, this is a product question, and I don't think that the technology and ideology of decentralization is enough to just get people to engage with a decentralized marketplace for the ideological reasons.
What do you think the biggest reason is for that? Like the biggest thing that holds back decentralization from making it so easy for these things to happen, like having a decentralized Fiverr, for example. Why, in your opinion, why is it so difficult for that to happen, even though it could exist today?
I think it's incredibly hard for people, for groups of people, to make just, for lack of a better term, mediocre decisions. Like when a lot of people come together, I think it's far easier for them to go for moonshots, because it's easier to reach a consensus around something that is obviously awesome than it is around something that is just, okay, that makes sense, let's do that. These kind of consensuses, I think, are just super hard to reach and super hard to act on. And so if you were to run a DAO that is supposed to build such a marketplace, I think it will be incredibly hard for it to actually build a decent product with a decent stack behind it, and for that product to be constantly upgraded and constantly shipped at the same pace that Fiverr and Upwork and freelancers ship their products, which is basically on almost a daily basis, you will see upgrades to the product. I just think that decentralization adds a layer of complexity to decision-making that would make such products just incredibly hard to design and ship. I think that decentralization works for a different kind of product, and only then, actually, when there is like this super top-tier meritocracy that happens at the top. So you would have like amazing super developers like Andre and Vitalik that build like 50% of the ecosystem, and then everybody kind of feeds into that, and the consensus is built around that. But unless I think these super individuals, like these super developers, super product designers are there, I think consensus around the day-to-day decisions would be just too hard for a community to come around and ship things.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. It's an interesting point to make. Also, stepping back from DeFi specifically, just looking at the overall Web3 industry that's emerging, where do you think we're at in that, not cycle of adoption, but growth, I guess, in terms of, there's a lot of projects out there, there's a lot of companies, a lot of startups, there's a lot of things happening. But nothing is really like fully integrated into society yet. No one's using it in mass quite yet. The best use case across Web3 has been Bitcoin over the last 10 years, but nothing else has really taken foot as of yet and substantially. So when you take a step back and you look at this new industry, this new version of the internet that's starting to finally grow and emerge, where do you think we're at in that? And do you think it's very, very early? Do you think we have a long ways to go still? Do you think we've come a long ways already? What are your thoughts just overall?
I think I think we've come a very long way, first of all. Like, remember in 2011, none of the things that, let's say, I was saying to our potential investors at the time, and Bitcoin was trading at $13.50 already at that point, with significant volume. I think it was reaching around $100 million volume a month or so. Oh, sorry. So around $100 million market cap. So to us, it was huge. And like you would talk to investors and principal forward-thinking individuals, and like nothing made sense. So we've obviously come a very long way in the past decade from there. Like people care about the fact that there are now non-government issued currencies that are maintained by either corporations or DAOs or individuals. And you can't at this point roll back the democratization of creation of money. And not only that, I think that there is a possibility that we will see whether it could be an algorithmic stablecoin that just works instead of Luna and could take the world by storm. Maybe there will be an alternative currency to the US dollar and the euro that simply works globally and is unstoppable and is perfectly stable with predictable inflation and deflation mechanisms. Or you could face a nightmare scenario where Facebook issues its own cryptocurrency, and then you have an economy the size of 2.5 billion people that outscales every other government, and now Facebook is the most powerful entity in the world. And all of those realities are possible today and entirely impossible 10 years ago. So I think we've definitely come a long way in terms of understanding what can and cannot be done. But we also have to understand what can and cannot be done is defined to a large degree by regulation. So let's say if there were no regulation whatsoever, I think the world as we know it, basically, an economy as we know it at this point would have been just completely destroyed by cryptocurrency. And that's an axiom. Like that is definitely true. If you would not have the regulation we have in place and the enforcement mechanism we have in place, by this point, we would have had cryptocurrencies issued by large corporations, by communities that would have just completely demolished the economic system that we have in place at the moment. And so the boundaries of the system, I think they're primarily set by regulation. This is the state of things, and I think this is going to be the state of things going forward. Meaning it's the regulation that's going to set the boundaries for where the industry should be going. So for instance, I think that there will be a huge decision to be made once a central bank issued digital currencies properly emerge. So we are already seeing these large projects being launched in China and other countries. But I think that once more countries issue CBDCs, there will have to be a decision. Hey, do we allow both central bank issued digital currencies to exist next to Tether and USDC? And what does that even mean? Like, what does it mean for free digital dollars to exist? Do we allow that or not? I think that's going to be a huge decision for a lot of governments. I think there's going to be a decision around DeFi. So I think at this point, DeFi is a niche product that is not really gathering steam or demand, meaning CeFi is still dominating the field. We also saw virtually a rug pull graph when it comes to NFT volume, right? So the volume of trade of NFTs on OpenSea has decreased by 99%, which is just an amazing figure. It is a remarkable figure. So that's an indicator with regards to the market interest in NFT trading. Not NFTs, but NFT trading, specifically NFTs of questionable artistic value and minimal utility. I think that NFTs have amazing value in terms of utility carriers, but I think NFTs that are entirely tied to the artistic value of the NFTs are bound to disappear. So that's kind of my thoughts about NFTs and DeFi and kind of the state that we're at.
Yeah, some good thoughts there. I'm definitely under the impression that one of the biggest things that's going to affect global economics is going to be stable coins. And that might be shocking to a lot of people because it's not like the most exciting thing in the Web3 space and in the blockchain industry. I mean, stable coins are stable. They're not as volatile. They're not exciting to people, but they're so important because they're pegging a fiat system to this world and creating on-ramps and off-ramps, and regulation around that is incredibly important in terms of, if a country wants to have a CBDC come out and they want to have an environment within an economy where that can actually flourish. Can it, be side to side with something like Tether or another algo one like Terra Luna at some point, or USDC, or something that's heavily, backed by large tech, big tech, maybe big banks, other institutions at some point? How does that affect economics if they're traded against each other? I think people, in a lot of ways, and maybe it's just they misunderstand, but they don't think about how impactful money is on society sometimes, and finance, and the little changes can just be abrupt. So I think stablecoins are going to be really important in terms of how they're regulated and how they become legal going forward, because they're incredibly important tools. And then you made a lot of good points on NFTs and DeFi and so many other niches that have popped up and that I think will be important, that have a lot of great utility, but still very, very young in a lot of aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I genuinely think that a lot of people underestimate just the kind of how much change can be triggered by the further democratization of stablecoins. So, as we both of us mentioned, stable coins issued by large corporations can completely destabilize the market, the economics as a whole, because stable coins issued by entities that are big enough essentially create economic units that are bigger than the countries that we know, right? So suddenly you have an economy with 2.5 billion participants in it, which means it has significant power and significant ability to affect their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, Meta, aka Facebook, they have like a third of the world's population on the internet and direct access to them through their entire ecosystem. If they were to launch one token, whether it's something like Libra or something else that they do, or they did some kind of SDR-esque, basket-based currency, which I think is what they were going for originally, they would immediately have access to the 2.5 billion people that, are on WhatsApp or on Facebook and Instagram and social media, getting into VR and virtual reality. And I think at some point they will do that. And I think it will disrupt a lot of things globally. But it's very interesting that they weren't able to. I don't know what's going to happen first, a large corporation putting out a major stable coin or a CBDC, but both seem pretty neck and neck at this point. Either way, it's going to be very disruptive.
Yeah, I agree. And to be honest, obviously we have our own currency token, specifically CHA, and we've made a decision to build CHA as a utility token that is designed to provide users with value when they're interacting with Chase.com. So when we're talking about Meta, we're really talking about giving people the ability also to interact with one another. So thinking about an example, let's say a person who is based in Colombia, such as yourself, if you had to choose between accepting 100% of your payments in your local currency or accepting a currency which is accepted by 2.5 billion people, that is not a trivial decision. Do you trust your local government and your local central banking system more than a company that has an inherent interest in making sure that its economy is successful for the more than 2 billion users that use it? And obviously, a lot of people will be making that decision. I think a lot of people, without governments preventing it, a lot of people would be making the decision around the world to utilize currencies issued by corporations and not governments, which is a dangerous thing, by the way. I'm not for it. I'm just saying that this is a clear and imminent danger to democracy, first and foremost.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly important for democracy, especially Bitcoin too. again, it's one of the most amazing things that has ever happened, I think, in human history, at least in my point of view. When's the last time we had a technological innovation on money itself? And when has it had such a profound impact? And at a time when people distrust government at all-time highs, more than they ever have in human history. And they're choosing it, and they're choosing to bet on it when they feel that they need a hedge against centralized authority. I think that's incredible. And I think it's incredible what Bitcoin has been able to achieve in terms of a market cap today, despite it being such a simple, slow, clunky blockchain. There's nothing really amazing about it except its symbolic value and the fact that it just keeps going. So I don't know. I have so much to say about Bitcoin when it comes to that kind of stuff, when it comes to democracy. I think this space is nothing but good for it in the end because democracy has so many issues today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bitcoin is a blockchain MVP, like minimal viable product, right? So it's like the simplest possible blockchain possible. It is basically a decentralized ledger. This argument has been stated many, many times, but this argument has also been true for over a decade now. If Ethereum were to launch before Bitcoin, Bitcoin would have never emerged because Bitcoin is technologically inferior in every possible way almost to Ethereum because it provides less functionality. It is obviously energy intensive. It's incomparable in many ways to the functionality provided by the best chains right now. But end of the day, through its history, through its consensus, and through its ideology, Bitcoin still is the most important cryptocurrency in the world.
I agree. I think that's a really interesting way to put it. I think we should wrap it up here. I got to get to another meeting, but Anderson, thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Really appreciate it. Really quickly, where can people go to learn more about Chains? Obviously, they can go to chains.com, but do you want them to go to another resource? Do you guys have a community somewhere? Where do you want to direct people?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, yes, going to chains.com is probably the right way to start. But from chains.com, you'll be able to reach our Twitter and Telegram. There's over 100,000 people there who provide 24/7 support on our channels. I think going to our Telegram, asking any question, basically 24/7, you'll get a reply from other community members or community managers.
Perfect. Guys, go check out chains.com. They got some great products coming out. They're doing some great stuff in the space. Make sure to like the video and subscribe as well if you haven't to the podcast. Anderson, thank you for taking the time to come on. Really, really appreciate a good conversation. Very insightful, very educational. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right,
Thank
man.
you, Brandon.
Take care. See you soon.
Cheers.